First item up on the agenda is the City Rail Link, and so I think we've got Joe and Stacey and John. So welcome along, and appreciate the presentation pre-circulated, so I'll leave it with you.
Kia ora tātou, malolile, talofa. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to have a quick chat on the City Rail Link. To my left this morning is the EGM of Public Transport and Service and Safety for AT with Stacey van der Putten. On my right I have Joe Reeves, who's their comms manager for projects and public interface from KiwiRail. And I'm the usual suspect. So, significant milestone was achieved before I start. I just want to thank a lot of people from CRL, Link Alliance, AT, Auckland One Rail and KiwiRail, who collectively run the first successful test train through the tunnel last evening. So that's a significant milestone. And to you as our council and our customers in Auckland, your sacrifice is now being realised by these milestones being hit. So we appreciate the mandate you've given us to deliver something for all of Auckland. So we might just throw this video on and see how that gives you a pictorial of what we achieved last evening.
Where was the polystyrene? Where was the polystyrene? In 23 at a confidential meeting we were told that they were going to cover the train in polystyrene and go through at different speeds. Yeah, hang on Ken, so we'll just keep it in a bit of structure, eh? Right, so, all yours John.
Yeah, thanks team. I think just to close on that point, that obviously the testing continues tonight. There was a very low speed initial testing power functionality of the interface functions that make trains to run safely. So we're going to incrementally lift the speeds as we can over the successive test periods. We've got a clicker issue.
What am I doing wrong?
Next one. Okay, just very quickly, just to highlight the mandate you've given us and the permissions you've given us as the customer of 96 days shut for the remainder of calendar year 25 are now moving forward. This is just a summary of where those shuts are. We've seen this before. All I will say is that we've been challenged internally by our own business and you as the customer to see if we can reduce those 96 days. We have those 96 days. Our mandate is now to challenge that and do as much as we can. And when I go into the block of line results from Christmas 24, you will see we achieved and exceeded above our planned targets. So we are on the right glide path. This colouring in competition, I'll quickly explain it. All of the purple that's reflected in the purple boxes are the work that needs to be complete before we open CRL. All of the other multicoloured boxes, apart from the green, are complete. The green, which is in the heart of the diagram, reflects the third main, which will be handed back in May this year and will enable us to have two mains operating between Westfield and Wirrie that has the opportunity to segregate passenger and freight and allow us to run a more resilient timetable. Next slide. This is the calendar which you've seen before. I won't dwell on this. This hasn't changed, but to my point I made previously, we are challenging our business to deliver as much as we can, as safe as we can, and as effective at highest production levels and quality throughout the year. So the grey reflects complete line closures and the blue reflects partial line closures so we can still operate trains on parts of the network. I'll now go into a quick update of what we achieved over Christmas in terms of some statistics. The key piece here is the box on the bottom left of the schematic. It shows you where we are with our completed percentage rates of the key projects we're delivering. You'll note we're almost 95% complete on the third main, which will hand back in May this year and open. We have completed P2P, which is at 100%, and we're at 95% for C9 Britomart, which is the active works to enable all of Britomart to be opened. In terms of plan versus actual tracking to program, we are slightly ahead of target to CRL Day 1 opening next year. Just some stats, high level, that just shows you what we achieved as a team in partnership with AT and Auckland One Rail and you, our customer, allowing us to mandate to have the network shut. It's proven that we can achieve a lot. Some interesting stats I'll highlight is the 7.4 kilometres of rail infrastructure reinstatement that we did. That's in terms of the rail we laid. That's equivalent to stretch up and down Queen Street twice and halfway back down the second time. In terms of how much work material we took out of the network to replace old formation and drainage, that could fill 12 Olympic-sized swimming pools. The aggregate we carted in to the network to actually replace that and lift the condition of the network into a good state to run a reliable network equates to 43 kilometres of truck and trailer units parked nose to tail from the Auckland Harbour Bridge to the top of the Bombays. So to just understand the quantum, I just wanted to paint those very, baseline stats in people speak that you gave us this opportunity. We are trying to deliver on our customer promise as a collective to make sure that we optimise what you've given us, our customer. So I think we have achieved that. We've actually exceeded our plan versus actual targets. Next slide, please, Joe. And that's just a continuation. I think it just shows you quantum. What did we learn as a collective group? We learned that setting up a delivery operations centre on the back of the AROC, the Auckland Rail Operations Centre, which you all invested in, and we as a collaborative team are now sitting in there as a tripartite group, AT, One Rail and Kiwi Rail, that is proving to be gold. People talk to one another. They don't send emails. They actually converse across the table, and it's proving dividend, right? So the DOC, or the Delivery Operations Centre, is proving its worth. We've aligned across our teams. We've solved issues that have come up early. We've been more effective and efficient, and we've actually advanced our forward planning horizon of what's coming next and how can we best deliver it. Next slide, thanks. Stacey.
Over to me. Thank you, John. I just want to make one point that I think, John, you missed, which is actually a really important point. So we all remember this time last year when we reinstated trains after the Christmas, what we call block of line, so the Christmas shutdown period, and we had repeated train cancellations due to heat restrictions coming across the network due to de-stressing activity that they were unable to complete. So KiwiRail this year managed to do all the heat distressing before school recommenced, and that's why we have seen no unanticipated restrictions in terms of times of day, which has been a real good success and helped the rail network get to back up to full contingent. And actually, yesterday, I think 57,000 people took train services yesterday, which was a really good result at this point in the year. In terms of the replacement services over that summer shutdown period, we obviously had a rail bus replacement strategy that was in place. We did introduce some changes to that. So we brought in a shuttle from Meadowbank to connect with the Eastern replacement services throughout the closure. That was a success and well regarded by the community there. We introduced these express services on the Southern, Eastern and Western line that really helped during those last couple of weeks of January where there were much heavier loaders as people was coming back to work, and they worked really well. And of course, we had that other week at the end of January crossing over into February where we did have a partial closure, which we had, bus replacements still in place. We'll just go to the next slide. I mean, overall, it works really well in terms of that bus replacement strategy. You're never going to accommodate everybody on a bus replacement as you are on the rail network, but obviously we had the full contingent of scheduled services back in operation from early January as well, so that did a lot of the heavy lifting. The numbers there were actually, it ended up being that we moved 260,252 people by rail replacements if we add on that last week. So you can see that a huge volume of people came back for that last week of closure and used those rail replacements. It was a 32-day closure in comparison to last year, which was a 20-day, but half the numbers in terms of replacements. So more people used them this year, which is a good sign in terms of that. Feedback was really good. Obviously, we had good weather for Auckland throughout that period, which I think both really helped in terms of the volume of work that KiwiRail could undertake, but also in terms of that customer journey for people as well. We had really good feedback on that Meadowbank rail bus stop loop in the Southern Express as well. So those express services were what we did see, which we kind of anticipated, was that people would wait for the express rather than taking the all-stop service. So that's something that we need to consider in our forward planning with how we do these going forth and how we work with the communities to give them sort of what they want as a replacement service. We did have some issues on the Western line, which we're sort of working through with the operator to make sure we don't have a repeat of that through the next time. So it wasn't just, there were other projects that sort of occurred during that time too that we took some, advantage of. So from a customer perspective on the next slide. So obviously we had the introduction of the Pukekohe station, so we had the opening of that a few weeks ago, which was really good. Now numbers on the Pukekohe line have gone up way, to pre what they were before Pukekohe line shut down, which is really cool. The problem we have now is that obviously the park and ride is constrained in terms of that, and so the other complaints that we're coming through is that we don't have enough parking at the park and ride for people, and so we're sort of working through some options on that, but it's a good problem to have. Yeah, because the community is really excited to have their station back and are on board using the trains, and so we're getting really good feedback about that. We did some lift upgrades at Swanson Station, so we took the time to do that, and we've actually got some more to be done next month at Sylvia Park, as well as we replaced 2 level crossings at Home My Station. So there was other stuff done across the network and used that time to our advantage to make sure we could give everything a deep clean and the likes of as well during that time. Now we're going to talk about the road and trucking update. John, I think you're first one.
Yeah, thanks, Stacey. Awesome, thank you, team. We just had a few technical difficulties today, Mr. Mayor, with our PowerPoint. Maybe AT might need to, or Auckland Council might need to spend a little bit of money to get it up. Just a segue. So, in terms of truck movement updates, the average was around. Or before I start, I'd just like to thank AT and ATOC for the interface functions they provided Kiwi Rail in a joined-up team approach to actually manage the rail bridge to support New Zealand Inc. and the supply chain over Christmas. There was a lot of work done for that, and that enabled us to complete the work program. So very quickly, there is an average of truck units of 400 a day, about 40 per hour, and that managed program through ATOC enabled us to deconflict the traffic management required for Auckland to operate. In total, we've got there a date till January the 17th. We had 6,500 containers moved by road to and from Auckland. The actual totals at the end of the block of line on the 28th of January, that total moved out to 12,000 containers, and that was a total of 1,000 kilometres of containers being moved by road. The resulting of that diesel burn is that we had significant carbon footprint, and it actually underpinned the value of rail in terms of it's better to rail than road bridge. In terms of sustainability long term, in our dual responsibility as the asset owner to support above rail commuter transport and also supply chain on a mixed mode network, a road bridging is not sustainable in long term for our rail industry for freight, and nor is it sustainable for our customers to have the network shut. And that comes back to one of the first points I made, is that the challenge now for calendar year 25 is to ensure that we push hard to fully optimise those 96 days shut that you have given us, and to attempt our best to reduce that. And that is the challenge we have, and that is what we are dealing with internally to deliver our customer promise. Stacey.
Thanks, John. Not a lot to add. I think the big benefit of this exercise was actually working together and using the Auckland Transport Operating Control, using our ATOC, to be able to sort of help guide us and also optimise the signals to make sure that we weren't causing undue disruption across other corridors through that movement. So that was a real big success. There were definitely lessons learned with that, but obviously that helps us do better next time. But all accounts, it went really, really well due to that collaboration, and they were monitoring it the whole time throughout that period to make sure that everything kept flowing, and did changes where needed in order to make sure that they weren't causing restrictive movements across the network as well. So it was really good. We're now planning for Easter and what that looks like. There's some certain projects across I think particularly around the Strand during that time, so we're sort of working on options with that, and but obviously having that direct conduit between AROC and ATOC has worked very, very well for the program to be successful.
Thank you. Hi everyone, great to be here again. So I'm going to talk through a bit about some of the communications activities that we delivered before, during and after the summer rail closure. We really upped the ante with our communications this time as a reflection of what we're delivering increases. Our communications activities need to increase in line with that. So we need to rise to meet the challenge of telling that network story effectively and sharing the challenges, and also balancing that out with the ongoing need to under-promise and over-deliver rather than the other way around. So one of the things I've got up here is a bit of a screenshot of some analytics, and this is some of the algorithms of social media show how our posts have been engaged with. And we knew already, but it's good to just confirm that any kind of worker and human interest type stories are really popular with the public. They just really like to see people behind what's going on. So we We produced a few videos with explainers and worker interviews and some progress updates, which I think we're going to show you in a second, one of those videos. I'll just finish this slide. We did some media releases before, during and after, just to keep people updated on what was happening. We did really targeted neighbour communications to make sure that everyone that lived near the network where we were doing sort of particularly disruptive works was well informed and knew who to go to if they had any problems. And we're always actually amazed by the low level of complaints that we get compared to the level of what we're achieving on the network and the level of work. So our track teams were really supportive with that community engagement. And the wheel just kind of shows the sentiment and also the rough amount of views, which I think is quite a decent number. And we do get lots of positive comments as well as some less than positive comments, but on balance, all pretty good. Lara, I think you were going to hopefully play the video. Thank you. Oh, on the page before, there's a video. Should we do that? Do you have that lined up or not? No? Okay. We can skip it if it's... Oh, okay. Yeah, great. Thank you.
So for the site, our first task was to rip out the old rail, dig down and rebuild the formation up. So we started here on the 27th of December. What we found was the geotechnical equivalent of custard or a thick soup. What we found was a bit of a shock to us. We weren't expecting it at all. We ended up having to accelerate our program. We brought in additional people, additional plant. We had our night shift as contingency. We ended up cutting down an extra 1.5 meters than what we were expecting, and our total dig depth was 2.6 meters. And we were able to basically throw manpower and machines at it, get the dig out completed, and then rebuild it up on time and to program. For this block line, we are dropping in 3 turnouts, so half a crossover. That'll enable us to keep the down main open at a later date. All up, we're putting in 9 full turnouts, and 8 of those turnouts will then turn into 4 crossovers. The block lines that we have are critical for us. Being able to shut the network down, rip out the entire track, do our dig outs, and do everything we need to do is invaluable to us to rebuilding this network. As well as setting this up for the C8 Henderson works, which is part of the wider CRL, it's also providing greater resilience for the network. So by renewing the formation, renewing the drainage, we're extending the life of the assets. So we're creating something that's going to actually last a lot longer for the people of Auckland and our commuters, as well as freight services and anything else that may run on this line.
Thank you. Yeah, so I chose that video because it was one of the most popular ones in terms of views, but also because it just kind of shows you some of the challenges that we face, and until we actually get out onto the network, we don't always know exactly what we're going to find with ground conditions. Thank you. Come to the next slide, please. So this is just a continuation of some of the communications activities, just to give you an overview of what was carried out. One of the things that we did for the road movements in the areas that we thought was a risk of getting congested is we went and spoke to some of the local business associations and some of the retailers, and then we followed up with them afterwards, and none of them reported any sort of major extra congestion, so that all went well. And then we obviously had the Pukekohe station opening, where we had various people come join us and jump on the first train, which was great, and we got some really good coverage from the media that followed up with the communities on the day that they all got the first train, and just such nice comments from people just so happy to have their train back, and which was really nice to see after 2 years of lots of patience from the community. Thank you. And this is a slide that I shared with you last time I was here, but just a kind of reminder of some of our sort of top-level key messages and the different materials and activities that we'll be using on an ongoing basis. And when it comes to the next rail closure, which will be Easter, we will be following lots of the same approaches that we've done, and just making sure that we're using lessons learned and going with content and information that we know people most want to hear and that is most useful to the public. Well, that's it from me. Thank you. Back to you, John.
Okay, the upcoming Easter closure, Stacey, and I'll just give you an overview. So what are we projecting? The main effort, or the key thing for us, is to complete the Wiri to Key Park third main for opening at the end of April, early May, which will enable us between Wiri and Westfield to have a third main to deconflict freight and passenger service. and provide resilience to run the timetable we need to deliver on our customer promise. That is our main effort. Around the rest of the network, we'll be working on the rail network rebuild, which is addressing formation and drainage upgrades and civils work, specifically around the station areas and in Henderson and on the Western Line, and then also continuing on with the Western Power Feed. The Western Power Feed's deadline is August for commissioning this year, so there are some significant milestones that Easter will lead and lay the platform for continuing development of the network in terms of infrastructure. Next slide, please, Lata. Obviously, the key thing for us is, as Joe touched on and also Stacey touched on, is from an operational perspective, the Delivery Operations Centre, which is that joint collaboration between AT, Auckland One Rail and AT, will overarch and manage the block of line to ensure we deconflict early, make decisions and optimise the delivery targets to achieve plan versus actual that we've committed to you that we must deliver. And also to implement the lessons we've learned from the first block of line, which is to ensure we have the adequate resources, safety mechanisms, continuing the momentum to achieve above target to lessen the pressure on Christmas 25. I'll ask my colleagues if there's anything else they'd like to add and go to Stacey first.
Thanks, John. I think just lastly, we're taking the same approach in terms of working together. So those weekly stand-ups to make sure that we're actually over every single detail, as well as sharing that with ATOC at Smiles Farm to make sure we have their eyes and ears and support throughout that period as well, because that worked really well. So taking the same approach. I don't really have anything else to add. I think it's been quite a success. Definitely far improved than previous years in terms of that comeback. Like I said, there are no heat restrictions across the network, and it's actually worked really well. So we're grateful. We're very aware that the resilience in Aucklanders and the perception from Aucklanders is totally compromised. So that's one thing we're watching in terms of that, about that trust and confidence to use rail when it's there. And so putting out messages to make sure that people know that trains are available and open, and we do have weekend trains within the foreseeable too over the next few weekends, which is good. So encouraging people to get out there and use the network with that too. Thank you. We'll go to questions now, Chair.
Okay, thanks, team. So I've got a heap of questions. So first one up, Ken. Oh, thank you very much. And thank you very much for all your hard work, and thank you very much for the good points, the positive stuff. But it does test my confidence when things that were poignant last time are omitted this time. 3 questions. We were told that there was 68 operational procedure manuals to be written and only 5 had been written. How many of those have we got finished now? We were told what a big task that was going to be.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. Just on that, I can't give you the exact figure. What I do know is that we have an operational transformation program called the Auckland Metro Transformation Project, which is co-funded by Auckland Transport and the Crown, which has been underway for 3 years. Part of that mandate is to technically write manuals for operational work, as in rail work competencies. That is an ongoing commitment we've made. I can't give you the exact number. I can come back to you. I do know that work sits under my mandate, and that is a program that I am responsible for, and it is working, and we're addressing that slowly and balancing it with the delivery and upskilling optics we have and mandated to Crown to deliver over the next 18 months. So it's a work in progress. So I'll come back to you with the exact number, but we do have a mechanism to address that.
Okay, but am I correct that operations can't start until those manuals are all in place?
The CRL pieces, the CRL tunnel itself, which is the key part, is 90% complete. That is the 3.2 kilometres of tunnel track which we're operating. We've already started the training of the physical maintainers that go in to support the tunnel, and that CRL piece of work is separate to the other competencies which include the 68 manuals. So of those, I can give you a breakdown through the AMTP program, and actually that's reported at the Joint Governance Group on a afternoon meeting, which occurs monthly, which is occurring this afternoon, and there's an update provided to AT on that program. So in terms of the CRL, we are at 90% in terms of complete the manuals, and we've already commenced the training to be ready on time for opening. The other manuals we're referring to are for internal Kiwi Rail competency-based training, which are writing and a work in progress.
Okay, thank you. That's really encouraging that you have all the facts in such depth, but it just leads on to my second question. We were told 1,200 train activities for training the drivers. There was going to be up to 1,200 train movements to train the drivers. Are they all inside the tunnel, or do they have to go out on, does that training include going out onto the above ground track?
Sorry, I'll hand to Stacey for part of this. The first part of the question, Ken, I can probably ask. AOR are responsible to obviously provide the training of their drivers. What I can tell you is we've factored in the demands for them to practically run their test trains to drive, to test and validate their drivers and train them as part of the glide path to the day we open CRL. That is built into the overall master plan. And AOR are the ones who actually set the competencies and the training plans, and they're integrated into the access we need to actually then have the trains run and the drivers to be trained. Stacey, would you like to add?
Yeah, thank you, John. Look, I'll just say that potentially, Barry, what we should actually do is come back at some point with the CRL readiness update, particularly about the operationalisation of the asset itself, into more detail.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. And last question. Presumably, that last video of digging up the tracks, presumably you had a geotech consultant. Is there any penalties in the contract or in a financial manner for him not being able to tell you that it was soup, only 500 mils under the surface?
Look, I'm not over the commercials, but what I can say is that this network is very old. It's 80 years in some places, and the geotech surveys that we do are, you know, there may be gaps here and there. You know, that was a really unknown. What we showed you there is we had the geotech survey saying 1.6 metres was where we needed to go to, and we went down there and found that we had to go to 2.6. It's a bit like the same issue around cables in terms of unregistered cabling that's sitting on the network, not put in by rail, put in by Vector, put in by other users of fibre across the network. Sometimes it's not registered or logged based on either they've missed it or they don't have robust practices. So there are a lot of unknowns, Ken. So we do our very best, and we just have to work through. The good thing is I think that team acted with pace and urgency and found a way through. So
I wasn't yep. Being nasty to the team.
So I'm not over the commercials, so I can't.
Okay, Shane.
G'day, thank you, Chair. Yeah, look, wonderful success. This is awesome. Loving that video and can't wait for the invite when we do eventually get there to go and check it out. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions on Henderson and the rebuild. Firstly, with the rail closures over summer, was there any reason why we didn't do the Henderson lifts then? Because they're currently being done and the lifts will be closed until June, and it's a huge concern for the community.
Yeah, that's a good question, Shane. I'll come back to you on that. Yeah.
Thanks, appreciate that. Might need to come back to me on this one too. But at the end of the slide, I see there's track works upcoming from Henderson to Swanson. Do we know if there's going to be a closure planned, or is that part of the Easter works, or do we have any kind of more detail on that?
So all of the closures over the 96 days include the program of work. So we won't be going outside the bounds of the 96 days as shown on the schematic, if that's clear, Council.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. And last question is a bit of a weird sideways one, but we do get lobbied a lot about Kumeu and passenger rail. Yeah, I know. So this sort of stuff where we're digging down into Henderson and finding custard and soup and huge more works than we thought we would do. Are we contemplating, if we were to ever get passenger rail to Kumeu, would we have to upgrade that track between Swanson and Kumeu as well? And was that part of the discussions or not?
Yeah, look, yeah, good question, and I've sat in some of those meetings, and we know that QMU has got floodplain issues, and we're very aware of the geotech and the surveys that would need to go in there. In terms of QMU and passenger services, I think that links back to the 30-year PBC, the program business case for a rail plan for Auckland, and a third and fourth track railway. So in the thinking and the funding, obviously with the plans conceptually are there, but in terms of accelerating that decision cycle, it's above my pay grade. But it would be nice to think that we could keep the momentum of what we're doing here and to allow the people of Auckland in the urban areas, the outlying areas, to have a rail service. So we understand the intent. We have not made any commitments. We have, however, in our 30-year program business case for rail around a third and fourth track railway and what that looks like for Auckland Metro and a mixed mode network. We're looking at that as part of our design thinking.
Thank you, and thanks so much for all your work. Awesome. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Shane. Desley?
Yeah, I want to add my thanks to completing the work on time and at a time that, you know, of all the times it could happen, it's probably the best of the options so far. Look, there's a reference in the paper and in your slides today of Ports of Auckland access being positively managed, and the freight trucks. I think you said there's now 400 freight trucks because of the rail line being closed. How is that being positively managed, and could you just give us a little bit more detail around that? Because it's not so much the Tamaki Drive, but it's what happens after that.
Yeah, sorry, Desley, I was... could you just repeat the last part? The genesis of the question is around how was that being actively managed? Is that correct?
Yes, because I mean, obviously, we've got a lot of concerns because they're not accessing the motorway, they are going through residential streets. So how is that working? How are you monitoring it? And sort of what confidence can we give the residents in the likes of Orake Road and stuff like that in Apapi?
Yeah. Thank you. And so that was really due to the signal management, and through ATOC sort of prioritising the signal management to make sure that the flows were correct and we weren't sort of impacting the network more broadly, and keeping constant eyes on it as well. So they did have to make some adjustments in real time, and you know, obviously where there were crux points in the networks to do things differently and on the go. By all accounts, it did go well. We know that there's works there at the Strand in Easter. Yeah, and so with the works at Easter, they are having to look at things slightly differently with the flow. So I think from memory, let's have a wee look. Arrivals, State Highway 1 for arrivals and State Highway 20 for departures. So that's what they're sort of working on the basis of now, and sort of working out the planning with ATOC and making sure that that'll work in a real time.
Yeah, that was my next question, because of course the State Highway, whereas those trucks wouldn't have been too bad if they could go through State Highway 16, it is really bad when they have no access to the motorway, which they don't. So you've got NZTA here in the room. Can we just try and get it joined up around the timing? And Joe, can we look at some comms around that? Because, you know, I can't remember the NZTA works off the top of my head, but at the moment you cannot go onto the motorway on State Highway 16. So it absolutely has a huge impact from a residential perspective. And I think I probably need some support around that if that is still, that motorway access is still not available come Easter. Thanks.
Thanks, Desley. Daniel?
Good morning. Thank you very much for the report. I got a couple of questions. I'm just wondering if you were able to comment at this point with the great work that's going on now, and I appreciate the work that's gone into the notice as a requirement for the grade separation that will be required at Takanini, but there will need to be a lot more momentum going into that given what's coming and the requirement to get that grade separation, given that the barrier arms will be down more minutes per hour than not in that part of the corridor. Any comment on progress with respect to that part of the work program?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. It's a good question. And look, we'll come back with an update on that in due course as well. I mean, Takanini is one we do want to prioritise, and ideally over the current forward plan with the Christmas program this coming year.
Okay, well, look, I look forward to that. I wanted to thank Auckland Transport for the changes to the design to accommodate the at-grades for the Weymouth Clendon roundabout. I think that was a pragmatic response and helped to allay some concerns from people in that part of the community. But what I wanted to know, has Auckland Transport identified problems with some of the work from its contractors with respect to the pre-sealing work when it does the road resurfacing? I'm getting a lot of complaints because of failures with your chip seal, because that pre-sealing work hasn't been done to standard, and it's meaning that these chip sealing too often than not are failing, and it's causing real angst from some of my constituents. And I wonder if that's a matter of auditing and renegotiation with your contractors regarding their work program.
Thank you, Councillor. Maybe that's a topic we can pick up in the next conversation with the rest of the AT team. But yes, there is a rectification program in place for works and fault finds with the contractors. Yep.
Great. Mayor Brown.
Yeah, good that you got that work done through the shutdown. How close did we go against budget? Because every time you spend it and all that digging out, it looked like a lot more money than I'd thought of.
I'll have to come back to you, Mr Mayor, on the actual budget. I've got work quantums and figures and numbers, but I haven't got the budget comparative analysis spend, but I can get that detail for you.
Yeah, well, you have to do it at a certain time, so it is what it is, but it would be interesting to know where you ended up. And are there any lessons you've learnt for the next break about perhaps you could go out and prod the road underneath a bit?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Mr Mayor. You know, we had 19 cable strikes. We had the issue that Councillor Ken spoke about with respect to, you know, doing our pit tests, that sort of thing, test pits, where we're going down 1.6 and we find we have to go down 2.6. So there's some reliability engineering. We're going over those lessons to see how we can be better. We actually exceeded our deliverable targets in terms of quantums by 15% from Wirri to Westfield in terms of the work that was done on the in around the third main. We've learnt that having one delivery arm of the business by combining what is capital works and our maintenance works in one efficient macro team, for want of a better term, and hit the network hard is proved dividends in having a control mechanism at the top. I think one thing that we did learn early is that we need to try and go out to our customers with the magnitude of what we're trying to achieve in terms of our target. So when it comes to the end of the block, we have crisp, sharp comms to come back to council and to AT and our customers around. We said this, we actually achieved that and more, and not have the lag, because there was a lag between the finish of the block and the final results being issued.
Okay, well, I'm into the lessons you learn every time you do something. That's my bit. And so that one there, you dug down a lot further. You think, what was the performance of the rail work over those soft areas before you did this? Was it an early warning? Did you get sort of train movement, or was there something picked up? Because you can actually have wet lower layers and a firm above layer and still have everything working. And then the last bit on that is very wet soils is usually a drainage problem somewhere or other. So digging it all out and sticking it all back and not realising it's got soft from a drainage problem just means you're going to be doing it all again. So how do you go on those things?
So, you know, I'll have to come back to you because I have to go to the engineers to go into the deeper dive, but we just got to remember that nothing was done for probably, you know, parts of that network in terms of drainage and formation for up to 80 years on parts of it. We know the historic issues of funding. We're not going to go there now, but there are technical equipments we've got and capabilities now to aid early intervention in terms of intelligence on the network, new ATIS machinery which allows us to automate and inspect track early. That's just coming online to allow us to, in the future, be far more proactive in reaching preventative maintenance so we don't have these issues. The issue we do have is we have to recover the network as best we can with what we have to work with. So I'll have to come back to you with a list of those. Great to get some questions, Mr. Mayor, and I can come back to you because I do owe you a monthly report, and I do owe you, Desley, a report with respect to the lubrication on Ōraki, and I'll give you that right now. The reason it's delayed this week and wasn't implemented is because we hadn't met environmental consent with respect to the bridge and the water. That has now been completed this week, and we'll be switching on the lubricator and undertaking the trial of noise to evaluate the effectiveness of operating the Whitmore system with effect next week in Ōraki Basin.
Okay, fair enough. I will want to continue a bit of exploring about the engineering, because I know that engineers have got a hell of a lot more conservative in recent years. And so if the trains went over for 80 years, it might have been squashy for 80 years and the trains went over it. I own industrial land which has got soft stuff underneath it, but with a good metre cap on it, it's amazing how it works. And so you can always justify spending money like that there once you dig it up and it looks terrible, but sometimes you actually don't have to. So I'm a bit, I'm cautious about that spend. So I want to poke around at some stage rather to make sure that these are fully justified, because it's a lot of money on that, and I think you're going to find that your budgets have gone well past things, because you can't go down 800 and suddenly go down 2.7 metres and find that it's the same cost. So good luck with that.
Okay, so we're halfway through the number of people that want to ask questions, so just ask if people can keep them nice and succinct as per the answers. So Richard.
Kia ora, thank you. Very exciting seeing the train move through the tunnels for the first time. I bet a huge relief for many a thousand worker who've been working on that project, so thank you. A few questions just on the track. So the slowness has been reported of the trains in general. I know that some of that is speed restrictions because of work on the lines, but could you please just give an update of when you were able to increase the speeds? I know you're looking at dwell times, or will this all be post CRL that actually will be able to have the trains working a bit faster?
Thank you, Councillor. Good question, and it's one that's already come my way in terms of that. So yes, there is a minute or two more actually in the timetable right now. That's to support resilience. We know that customers want to know how long it's going to take them to get from A to B is more important than their journey taking a minute longer. Yeah, and so that was obviously a resilience factor built in. We still have residual speed restrictions across the network, and that means that the operator can actually plan and have a reliable timetable that supports the network as it is today, rather than the network we're sort of building towards. And that's, I guess, the important factor. There will be improvements. There is a long tail in terms of how we do timetables, and that's important to understand. So they do have to go to unions for consultation. They do have to reach agreement. That has to be done months out. There's quite a robust rostering process that needs to occur. So because of that, obviously we didn't know if we would have any heat restrictions post the blocker line. So having that minute or two buffer was really important to make sure we had reliability on day one.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for the beginning of the year. We didn't have 22 days of issues like last year, so that's really pleasing. The other question around the buses, what are they called? Replacement buses, fantastic over the summer and things for like Luke Combs and things as well. Will that sort of level of service, how quickly can that be plugged in? Obviously, it's very easy when you've got a lot of notice and 33 days of work, but are you able to have that sort of level of service if there are other issues that pop up over the next year, pre-CRL?
Thank you. Yes, we will have a similar level of service. We're going to obviously work through in terms of what worked and what could be better and what needs to be adapted for that Easter sort of blocker line. We can only do these really large shuts during school holidays because we really, really rely on the use of the extra fleet that school bus services provides when they're not operating. So, we can't do that during the normal course of a general week when school's in, but we can during those school holiday blocks because it's lighter on the network. Yeah.
Thank you. And last question, just I think some of the original packaging showed us last year did show the off-peak still pretty, the gaps were pretty low. How frequent are you looking to bring those in, or is it sort of like open the CRL, try it, and then move to try and close the gaps, make them more frequent during the off-peak?
In terms of trains?
Yes, sorry, yeah.
So, I mean, right now, we have the timetable that we have leading up to CRL. I think we presented last time what that anticipated timetable will be within the first year of operations. That'll be incrementally, improved as patronage builds and the network allows us to do that. So, yes.
Okay, thanks, John.
A question about the bus replacements. They're going to the southern line, and I realise it must be quite a logistical challenge coordinating everything, but in particular the bus replacement, and I see the southern line at various stages has got some partial shuts down and night works, and then the big one in April. In particular, the bus replacement from the airport or from Puanui into Britomart, that do all those replacements do the tour of the south, like Papatoe, Middlemore, Otahuhu, and then I think even Newmarket. It's quite a tortuous commute, having sat through that in the middle of the summer and rushing in for an appointment. So I'm just wondering, in amongst all the other balancing, is there any prospect of getting a faster bus replacement from Puanui straight into Britomart along the motorway or something without having to tour all the scenic wonders of South Auckland, nice as they are to look at, but it takes a long while to get in.
Absolutely, Council. We know it's obviously not ideal, and that's why we introduced some of those express services that do have limited stops, so that will be reviewed. I'll take on board your feedback about Puanui and share that with the team and see what options are sort of working up for that next stage of the journey. What we also do too is make sure that people understand what other scheduled services are available to them, not just the rail replacement, because there's obviously alternate bus services that may be faster than taking a normal rail replacement. So we do encourage people to look at all the alternates available.
Yeah, I think that communication is important, because I think a lot of people just, aren't necessarily aware that the rail shut down, so they're used to getting, the bus to the rail and down. They do that, and then they don't have any choice at that point. So yeah, it'd be nice if there's a nice clear choices to people, and particularly people like me who don't bother over looking anything up, just turn up.
Thanks, John. Mike?
Thank you, and thank you for the positive, upbeat presentation. Can you just repeat again how long is the total shutdown period likely to be? Anyone?
Yeah, sorry, Councillor. It's the 96 days, the period throughout calendar year 2025. So in the schematic I showed you, you've got a 16-day period at Easter. You've got a series of long weekends over Matariki, King's birthday. You've got Labour weekend. You've got contingency with the school holidays, which is June, and then June, July, and September, and then you've got a 6-week period from the 14th or 16th of December this year and through until the end of January 26.
So 96 days, is it this year, 96?
Yes, so in total, from now until when CRL opens. So, okay, I get it. I'm not doing the math now, but we've already had of the 96.
It's a bit tricky, isn't it? Because it changes a wee bit. So that's a significant shutdown anyway. When you look back, I think in the last 20 years, there's been about 24 months when you take the annual block of the line. It's almost 2 years out of 20 when you add those shutdowns, whether it's for the block of the line, other construction works, CRO related, whatever. That's significant. And I think in the the last 3 years, almost 8 months. And so at the same time, speaking as a councillor and representative of ratepayers, the access charges that Kiwi Rail have levied, the rent for the services we pay for to work is around about 40 million annum, and there's no significant discount for lack of service. But anyway, my question is, would anyone know, any entity in the world, any rail jurisdiction in the world, especially in the first city of a country in the world, that would shut down its rail network in such a way to do essential maintenance? Because presumably in every country in the world they have similar issues. Does anyone know the answer to that one?
There's a lot in that question, Councillor. We've done international benchmarking. When we first went through this exercise before we came to you to ask around how much we need to shut and why we need to deliver 10 years of renewals in 18 months and reinforce $10 billion of investment the Crown made into both metros in Auckland and Wellington, split 7 million Auckland, 7 billion Auckland, 3 billion Wellington. We were challenged to go away and look at other railways around the world who suffered the same issue and come up with a plan to deliver that. And it is a lot to ask. The network, to be truly frank, was in a very poor standard, and it had been neglected for multiple years. That doesn't go past the fact that your numbers are correct and they're quite significant around the shut period. But I want the council and also AT and others who are in partnership with us to understand that we were challenged both by AT and by Auckland One Rail and by council when we went with this plan to come to you to ask for 96 days shut, that we'd internationally benchmark this, and we did that with Australia, with Sydney, Melbourne, Perth metros. We did that with Network Rail, and those networks of mixed mode networks in those areas had suffered similar issues. And our modelling was then bench tested by independents from both the UK and Australia, and what we came up with was the shut periods we've requested and you've endorsed to get in recovery our network to deliver day one. So that's not answering your question, it's just putting out there what we actually did.
I'll just add to that. Thanks, John. It is an unusual approach, shutting down your whole network for a period of time. The key point here is the huge volume of work we've actually got to do to give us a reliable network, and that's why we've had to take this approach, and we've done it at the least disruptive time. There's no ideal time, but this is the least disruptive time for us to be able to do that, and actually it has got interest from others. We've been approached by Wellington as well as providers in the UK for our methodology about our rail replacement services and actually how to do it. So it's not unlike other places. They do need to shut down lines to do intense maintenance activity, renewal activity. The whole network, yes, it's unusual, but the key thing, we really want to have that reliable network come City Rail Link, and then work on what that future maintenance program is so we don't have these huge shutdowns going forth. We'll always need to have some shuts though.
You see, the problem we have is that rail has been a cardinal strategy of the Auckland Council for at least 20 years, and literally billions have been spent and are being spent and will be spent on it. And currently, rail patronage, the last time I checked, was about just under 14 million passenger trips per year. It was 20 million trips per year 5 years ago, and so you have this continual removal of service, because this is a people business. We're dealing with people. It's not just, is there more intelligent ways to maintain our rail network? We have to deal with our customers. And so we have a situation where continued customers, passengers, patrons have continued frustration, and a rail bus from Puanui is not the most pleasing experience for any passenger if you can get it, but you have lack of service, lack of predictability, and you have fare increases. And what are the fare increases justified for? Well, part of it is to pay for the increased access charges. It doesn't work well if we want to pursue the strategy and succeed as a city. And that relates to not only efficiencies and planning and carbon emissions, it's the whole strategy that's been frustrated. And then there's the cost. So that's the concern. Thank you.
Okay, Julie?
Thank you. Just to that point, there's an end to these shutdowns, right? Yeah. We're not going to do this forever. We're catching up. So, I imagine probably not next summer, but there is, we're not doing this on a permanent basis. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct, as Stacey said. This is just to get us to where we need to be and then move to a steady state.
Right, thank you. And I look forward to that. The other question I have is just further to, Councillor Hill's asked the primary question I had about the speed. Stacey, you mentioned that there are speed restrictions across the network. Could you just, and I think we have talked about this before, but it was a while ago, so can you just remind me why we have them? We seem to have a situation where, and I get your point about giving people certainty about the timetable. I think that's well made. But we have got a situation where, for example, the trains are going quite a lot slower than they can. So why do we have those speed restrictions? When do we anticipate they might come off? And then I've got one other small supplementary to that, which you might cover off. So I'll hold it in reserve.
Okay, thanks, Council. I'll answer. This is really a bit of a technical question. I'll try and keep it simple. There are 0 heats on the network at the moment. There is 3.7 kilometres in total of speed restrictions. I haven't got the minute calculation in my head, but that's significantly less than we've had. What is a temporary speed restriction? Every day our people are out on the network to make sure the network is safe to run trains and that our infrastructure is at the right level. A speed restriction is applied when we find a fault or a defect, or where we have completed major invasive work and we need the track to settle for a period of 7 days before we can lift it to the speed it needs to be at line speed. Those speed restrictions are usually 40 kilometres an hour, and that's standard. So maintaining a network is like servicing a car or running a car. You've got to fill up with petrol and you've got to service it. The 200 kilometres of the Auckland Metro network we service, we inspect every day, every evening, parts of it, and if we find defects we fix them and we have to apply a speed restriction. Our job in maintenance is to keep those speed restrictions to a minimum and also at the same time do capital works. So as a combination of doing our normal maintenance and combination of the work we need to do to lift the capacity of our network to meet zero day one, we're going to have a threshold level of around, and I think I quoted in one of the meetings here before with Trick, to run the timetable successfully we need to have, at day one, we need to have less than 2.7 kilometres in total speed restrictions on the network across the entire network. At the moment we're at 3.7 and we're still doing work. So I hope I've gone a bit more detail, but that's in general theme. That is why we have this fluctuation in speed restrictions. We need to maintain those to try and lift the train speeds, and that's an ongoing process that will be a little bit lumpy for the rest of this calendar year.
So potentially we're looking at, thank you, that was really useful. So we don't have blanket speed restriction across the whole network was my key takeaway from that. And really good to have that reassurance about the ongoing checking of the lines. One of the things I think that we've taken a massive leap forward in is that consideration of health and safety, not just for the workers but for the passengers, and I really applaud that. So realistically next year we will probably be looking at some new timetables that hopefully will take more advantage of the speed some of these trains can actually go. Is that fair? Great. Okay, cool. And then just to follow up, so in terms of, and sorry, this is I don't know a lot about trains question. In terms of how this plays out in practice for a train on the tracks, would this result in more noisy braking? So, for example, I was at Kingston last night and heard some really noisy braking as a train was taking off out of the station, and it occurred to me that that might be because actually they sort of have to hold themselves back. I don't know. Is that something that's likely to happen? Just thinking about the noise for the residents around it, that kind of stuff.
Or has she got squeaky track problems?
Yeah, I wasn't on the train. I was just
This is a good question, Councillor. This is part of the 44 lubrication pots that are being remote placed across the network, which have commenced their install. So on day one, what you'll find is that the rail wear will be far better maintained. We'll have a proper lubrication system that allows the rail and the wheels of the trains, when they go over these automated lubricating systems, it'll activate the jets, and the rail wheels will start to actually make the rail and interface between the wheel and the rail smoother. And we'll also have a far better grinding machine that goes through to keep the rail smooth, and that will find you'll reduce your noise, reduce the rail squeal, and that will take time, and we'll see positive results of that as over this calendar year. And the first trial will be started next week in Ōrākei Basin.
Cool. So it's the same issue as in you're trialling it. So fair. Thank you very much. Great. Appreciate it.
Chris.
Oh, thank you. Some of you who know me well know that as a little girl I was brought up by my veteran father on a whole lot of Churchillian quotes, and I think it's relevant to today. Success is not final, failure is not fatal, but it's the courage to continue that counts. And if ever we have seen evidence of courage, it's with the CRL. And so my question's actually, while I acknowledge the good reporting today and the importance of communication to the public, one, I also want to acknowledge Barry Potter, because I think without him as the sort of conductor within the organisation to see this through, we wouldn't be where we are. However, my fear is, Barry, that while it's important we've got this communication out today, it's probably giving some anticipation that the CRL will open earlier than it might. And I don't want to be the party pooper here, but there's an awful lot of work yet to be undertaken. Can you just outline some of the challenges that are ahead so that we don't get too far ahead of ourselves? You know, invitations aren't going to be, sorry Shane, forthcoming any minute soon, but can you just give us, while we're having a discussion around this, a little bit of a heads up on some of that work that still will be required to be done?
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Look, I'll address that in two parts, if I may. This session here has been specifically about the blocker line over the Christmas period. And the blocker line, I'll have to say, has gone very well. And the 96 days it's been referred to actually relate back to just before Christmas, and that period over the next 12 months through till end of January next year. So that's a good program. That's about the rail network. And there is much, I think, that we should be happy about. Of course, there'll be challenges on the rail network over the coming months, and we've got Easter coming up, and we will hear back from Kiwi Rail at the end of Easter. However, if I can just reinforce the critical path, the critical items on this project actually go through the stations more than the tracks. We've got the blocker line, but the CRL limited works around the tracks aren't necessarily on the critical path. That's about the stations. So the challenges coming up is the completion of the stations. Some of those are quite challenging. The Karanga Ahape station, look, there's 6 stories between the platform, if I recall correctly, and the surface. There are endless amounts of infrastructure that are going in there, electrical boxes that, you know, a civil engineer looks at and what on earth is this about? There is a lot of the systems and testing, and what's happening now over the coming months is the completion of the stations, the testing and commissioning and integration of the systems with the wider network. And that testing, look, the way I look at it is we're actually testing to fail, not to pass. We are testing these systems and controls for situations that are really challenging. And we don't quite know what you're going to find until you actually do the test. That's the coming months. That's what we will hear about and see. There will be challenges because what the public are going to see is completed stations. This is all black box type stuff really from here on. And that program, I have to say, is well managed. One of the real strengths of this project, I might comment or just note, is we have the Link Alliance, which includes Vinci and the other players and City Rail Link Limited. We also have this One Client Alliance, which is going very well between Auckland Transport, Kiwi Rail, City Rail Link Limited and Link Alliance. They are working very closely. All the signs I see are positive, but let's accept or understand there will be risks and challenges when we do the testing and commissioning and the completion of the stations. So that's really where the focus will be coming.
Thank you. So can you give us the assurance that while we're going to have this communication going out, that it will be in the context of moderating expectation, because disappointment's a very difficult emotion to manage. But I do want to acknowledge the work that you've undertaken on this, Barry, and I know you've had some personal challenges through the period, and it's been greatly appreciated what you've been able to do.
Thank you. If I might just, in conclusion, say opening a stall on target for 2026. So that's our consistent messaging.
And Christina, would you like me to answer about, So I'd just like to say I agree with you about Barry. Wonderful to work with. I just wanted to give you some reassurance that when we are planning communications, one of the key things that we think about, and I obviously mentioned briefly earlier, is managing expectations and just getting that whole tone right of wanting people to get excited about something, but understanding that it's way better to underpromise and overdeliver than the other way around. And so it is something that we're always considering, and your feedback on that is really good. And obviously today is a very exciting day for all of us with the first test train, but it is important that we keep in the back of our minds all times that we lay out for people the milestones that are coming up. And we have got a lot of milestones coming up this year, which will obviously build excitement, but we will make sure that we keep it clear that, we've still got a lot to do. Thanks.
Thank you. And the last question, Josephine.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report and the update. I just wanted to ask, I think it is about comms and just keeping people on board with this so they don't lose the big picture and they don't lose the why. When can we sort of start this countdown or build the excitement? Because I understand not wanting to, raise expectations, but at the same time, people naturally, vocal people naturally default to being negative. And this is not a negative. This is a positive for our city. So I really want to see that start to come through. And then also for people to understand the reason why you have to catch that rail replacement bus is because you're giving up something for the benefit of the city when we get this CRL happening. So I really want people to start changing their thinking as opposed to tagging us on Facebook, how come, there's issues with the train, to actually, this is why, because you're going to get this in the end. So I really want to see that come through. Because this is awesome. Really keep going. Don't rush it. Make sure it's ready for us when it's ready. That's what I think. I'm not going to be one of the ones that say rush because of money. I'd rather you do it properly, it's safe, and that when it does open, we don't have to stop because something isn't done properly.
Yeah, thank you for that. And you're absolutely right. And in a way, it's the opposite of what Christine was saying, but it's that whole balance. And I think some of the activities that we're carrying out for communications now are starting to build excitement in rather than just media releases and milestones, where AT's got a whole series of marketing campaigns and things to start getting people excited about what CRL will actually bring, because you're absolutely right, it's all about how it's actually going to change people's travel patterns, right, and what it's actually going to bring to their day-to-day lives. So starting to share things like journey times and how they will be able to travel around the city in a different way than they are at the moment. And the messaging is all there, and we are trying to get that out, so that will just be a kind of consistent campaign from now to then. Which will increase as we get closer to when it opens.
Oh yeah, cool. Because even telling them that actually January 2026, it's going to be shut down for the whole month, like letting people know these are when we're going to shut down. so that they know and they get it, oh, this is
Yeah,
why?
and I think you're right. So although, that was out there when we first did the announcement, I think you're right that those constant reminders probably need to keep coming out for people that they need to plan far ahead, and we'll take that in mind. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, team. You can step back. Thank you very much. Well done. Nice work. Is there someone like to move? Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Angela. Is there any debate? Quick comment, away you go.
Just a quick comment. Thank you so much to Kiwi Rail and Auckland Transport. It's been quite a journey, and not without drama along the way. I travelled last year, to the UK. It is not unusual to see rail, buses replacing rail. Because I was there only off season, there was a lot of maintenance being done on roads and on rail. It happens, it has to happen. And I think the incredible job in this particular topic here, the block that was done over 96, incredible, absolutely, once they dug down and what they saw, and then the work that they did. And in that video was, it's the tip of the iceberg, isn't it? But thanks to all of those workers, everyone out there, and I'm sure that there were times when they weren't getting the most friendly responses, but to the councillors that get that vision, that what we're going to have at the very end of this, how well our public transport system is going to work, and that can raise above the little things that go wrong along the way on such an enormous project. So congratulations and thank you, Kiwi Rail and Auckland Transport. Kia ora.
Thanks, Angela. Yep, and so just my quick comment is all those people were doing that work while the rest of us were enjoying a holiday. They were working at night. They were working on weekends. They were working on public holidays and doing a huge amount. So a big shout out to them. So it's been moved and seconded. We'll get another update after Easter. I was a bit worried we would still be here and we could just roll straight into that, but we won't be. So it's been moved and seconded. All of those in favour say aye. Aye. And against? Carried. Okay, next one up is the Auckland Transport update. That'll be short and